Hello, students. We're going to start talking about Chapter 1. I know that history is always week 1, and it's always very dry and very difficult, but we're going to try to get through week 1 without a hiccup. So, what is emergency management? What is it? Well, there's no real one specific detail as it relates to, you look it up in a dictionary and it gives you a single definition. But emergency management, is your book defines it as a discipline that deals with risk and risk avoidance. Okay? If you think about our government, what is our government's main essential function as it relates to us as citizens? Their main function and their main purpose is to provide safety and security to the citizens of the United States. Now think about that. We all get up in the morning, we all go to bed at night, get up in the morning, and we don't worry about why another country is coming over here and invading us. Why not? Because we have the United States military. So in the Constitution, the goal of government, or the role of government, is to have its citizens live in peace. When we talk about emergency management, I'm just not talking about people invading this country, but if you think about what our government's role is, that is essentially the number one role of the United States government. If you think about, we go down to the state level with the state police, their number one goal is our safety and security. And clear down to the local level, the East Pennsboro Police Department, their number one goal is the safety and security of its citizens within East Pennsboro Township. So that is our primary role as a police department, is when you go to bed at night and you call 911 and your house is burning down, fire, EMS, and police respond to your house and deal with that situation or that disaster that night. So if the house burns, there's electrical issues, we call PP&L, the fire department shows up. I mean, those are on the local level, but in the grand scheme of things, when we talk about the federal government, their role is to protect the citizens and everybody within the government. So if we look back, if you think about what occurred in the 1950s, I know a lot of you don't remember it. Probably nobody remembers it. Not even me. I'm not even that old, to the 1950s. But the Cold War, Ronald Reagan said one of the most important things, Mr. Gorbachev, take down that wall. The Cold War was taking place post-World War II, when there was a bunch of people, a bunch of world leaders that were vying for position and basically, talking back and forth, which is still better than World War I or World War II. So as we progressed in the 60s and 70s, we're talking about nuclear war. And nuclear war is kind of, I remember growing up that nuclear war was inevitable. It was going to happen. We and Russia, or the Soviet Union at that time, had hundreds, if not thousands, of missiles pointed at each other, and who was going to push the button first. And it was literally almost a decade of pointing missiles at each other. And how are we going to respond to those? I remember growing up, and seeing people building bomb shelters underground where they could live for 60 to 120 days, knowing that if there was a nuclear attack, it would be hundreds of years until we could live in the United States again because of the radiation. So I do remember the 80s. I do remember a lot of those issues that were taking place in the government at that time, the bomb shelters. It really didn't start taking effect until, obviously, the terrorist attack of 2001, the World Trade Centers, it wasn't domestic terrorism, it was actually international terrorism, but it was terrorism that was brought to us from around the globe. In 2001, obviously, the World Trade Centers were airplanes were flown into the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, and the Flight 93 that went down over Pennsylvania. How did we respond to those incidents? The one in New York City was an absolute and unequivocal mess, which launched the Department of Homeland Security. President Bush directed all agencies to be placed under the Department of Homeland Security, and we use the term in law enforcement umbrella. So everything falls under the Department of Homeland Security, the U.S. Border Patrol, U.S. Customs and Enforcement, U.S. Coast Guard, FEMA, Immigration and Naturalization, Secret Service, FBI, nuclear detection, law enforcement training, policies, national management. It all fell under this new umbrella in 2001, where the response would be a governmental response, and how it would respond to that was not a natural disaster, that was a terrorist attack. I remember post 9/11, massive amounts of funding were dumped into the Department of Homeland Security, and we were getting trained at the local, state, and federal level on how to respond to a disaster. Basically implemented the incident management, the incident command system, where we use a command system when responding to disasters. When I say disasters, and I'll talk about disasters, I'm not talking about just man-made disasters, meaning an attack, but we talk about natural disasters as well. Anything that causes a lot of confusion and a lot of loss, and issues with infrastructure, criminal investigations. Think about when Timothy McVeigh bombed the Oklahoma federal building, and yeah, it was a domestic terrorist attack. How did we respond to that? It was interesting that it was a domestic terrorist attack, and at the completion of the bombing, a patrol officer over 100 miles away just conducted a traffic stop on a vehicle with no license plate, and actually caught the Oklahoma City bomber. It wasn't any big, large, massive investigation. It was a traffic stop for a traffic infraction, not having a license plate. So it's kind of interesting that happened. But and then the first big disaster that occurred, and we're finally over it, but everybody talks about it. It's still dealing with it. Is the Hurricane Katrina incident in 2005, where a Category 5 storm hit New Orleans, and you learned a lot about New Orleans. I didn't even know that New Orleans is below sea level, and they actually have pumps. All the water that goes into New Orleans has to be pumped out It doesn't just flow out. Like, I live on the side of a hill and I don't have any pumps. The water just runs off and into the, you know, Susquehanna River Basin. But in 2005, when Katrina Category 5 hit, so much rainfall fell in New Orleans that the pumps would break down. They couldn't handle the water that was coming into New Orleans. And I remember, I didn't even realize this until I saw it in a textbook that was actually 16 years ago. It seemed like it was just yesterday that massive amounts of first responders responded to Hurricane Katrina. And when I talk about first responders, I'm talking about police, fire, EMS, military personnel. And when we think about it, what about the infrastructure? Electrical, sewer. How were we going to handle all of that? I remember watching the interstates and seeing massive amounts of electrical PP&L trucks, electrical trucks, going south on the interstate in caravans of 20 to 30 trucks to go down and assist in getting power back to New Orleans. And if you think about the response from Pennsylvania to Katrina, the entire country were sending people to that area to handle that natural disaster that took years and years and years to deal with. And it was the first big incident with the Department of Homeland Security. And your book describes it as a debacle, but how... And grant you, that was only 4 years after the Department of Homeland Security was enacted. How do we respond to an incident like that when you're not prepared? I mean, we know hurricanes have been occurring in the southern parts of the United States forever. So did we know that a Category 5 was going to hit New Orleans? No, but we weren't prepared. And being prepared is all the way at the local level. Now, New Orleans has instituted, obviously, they've built new pumps. They've built levee systems that the Corps of Engineers had built. I actually watched a program on television about it. It was pretty neat about how the Corps of Engineers saw that their levee system had failed them. And you imagine these levee systems were built 50, 75 years ago, and their levee systems failed, along with the pumps and how they deal with that. But the federal government took some pretty bad heat on it. But what can you do? I mean, the response afterwards was very, very quick, but it did take a lot of work to handle that natural disaster. So after that, if you think about where we are today, post Katrina since 2005, if you think about where we are from 2001, and there has not been a massive terrorist attack on the homeland since 2001. Now think about that. I mean, a lot of people can't comprehend. We have not had any serious terrorists. I mean, we've had domestic terrorists. We've had some terrorist attack. My goodness, yesterday a Capitol police officer was killed by domestic terrorist on Friday. Was hit by a car, and they engaged in some shooting and shot the suspect. But there hasn't been a massive terrorist attack on the homeland since 2001. And you think about all the agencies that are involved in that. Are you telling me that there hasn't been an attempted single attack on the United States since 2001? Wrong. But our government has been very successful in thwarting those attacks on our homeland. We talk about the loss of life in 2001. Did you see the financial impact the World Trade Center had when it came down? And I know the financial impact isn't nearly, it's hard to equate the financial impact with the human loss. But the financial impact on the United States was massive, billions and billions and billions of dollars of economic disaster that happened in Lower Manhattan, New York. Think about the infrastructure and the tunnels underneath New York City, the subways, the electrical massive power outages after that. And those high rises when you can't run your sewer pumps. And we don't think about that. We simply looked at the loss of life. But in fact, if you think about how it affected all of those people in New York City, I mean, travel, they were trying to get all the construction equipment post 9/11 in to rebuild, clean up, get things back to normal. If you remember, President Bush came out and said, we can't just stop. We got to keep moving forward. We have to go to work. And everybody was scared to go to work because we thought we were at war. So, this Department of Homeland Security or Emergency Management is nothing new. It's been going on for over 100 years, but it is moving forward with being more in tune with today's society. DHS deals with cybersecurity, and think about taking down Wall Street with a computer virus. All those things the Department of Homeland Security investigates and deals with on the homeland. So your homework assignment is, as I said, below coursework. Get those completed. And I did, in my introduction, forget to tell you something personal about myself. I was thinking about it afterwards, and I've been married for, I'll tell you something personally about myself. I've been married for 23 years. Yeah, 23 years. I have 2 children. I have 2 daughters. One is in Pitt for college, and my other daughter is graduating from high school this year, and she is off to college in the fall. We're still arguing over the college because our first choice is a $50-some thousand college halfway across the United States. So we have been discussing those issues that you have as far as college tuition with my daughter. So that's something personal about myself. Again, I forgot to tell you something personal in my introduction, so I apologize. Get your homework done. Keep up with the work. Good luck. You'll do great this semester, and have a great week.